This is Jim Prusak from the Pain PT. Good to see everybody today. I have a success story for y'all. I'm always so happy to bring success stories to people because they're so powerful and helpful. And I'm really grateful for Anna being willing to share her story. So Anna, thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Really happy for you to come on and share your story. So I'm going to turn it over to you, like we said off air, and just have you start, from the beginning and tell the audience a little bit about yourself and what you went through. And we'll kind of go through your process here.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, so my whole pain story really kind of started back in 2016. It was my senior year of college, and I started getting some abdominal pain here and there. It wasn't like debilitating at this point, it just kind of like a little bothersome thing. So I went to the doctor and they ran a few blood tests and they were all negative, so I just kind of like went on my way. But as time went on, the pain just started to kind of like gradually get a little worse and a little worse. And I started to try a couple like dietary changes and supplements, but nothing was really working so far. But so eventually my GI diagnosed me with IBS, and I was told that I would just kind of have to like continue to try to manage it. Try to keep your stress down, keep trying to identify your food triggers and things like that. Um, so I was just sort of like trying my best to stay positive at this point and live with the pain. But it was definitely starting to affect my mindset a little bit and my quality of life. Um, and then from 2019 to 2021 were some particularly stressful years, I think for the whole world, but also me specifically. Um, my best friend actually passed away very suddenly and very unexpectedly. Obviously, the global pandemic happened. I moved to a new state. I was planning my wedding, and I was traveling a lot for work. So yeah, this time was I was very stressed out, but I was just kind of like soldiering on and trying to ignore it. Um, and then there was one day at work when I just sat down to eat my lunch, and it just felt like my stomach was in this just like tight knot, and I just couldn't take a single bite of my food. So I took the day off, I went home, I took some Pepto-Bismol and waited for it to go away. But it didn't go away. That knot in my stomach actually stayed for the next couple of months. Um, and I was so unable to eat that I actually lost 20 pounds in that first month, that my pain was really, really severe. And I was so afraid of food that I only had five safe foods. And I actually did end up becoming pretty much housebound at this point.
Wow. So how long was that period of time from when that first hit you at work to you became housebound?
It was probably about 6 months that it was like
So,
really severe. Yeah.
yeah. Okay.
Mhm. And so, at this point, obviously, I'm really starting to get kind of desperate about trying to figure out what was wrong with me. Um, because I'm not accepting this like IBS diagnosis at this point. I'm like, this has got to be something more severe, right? Because like I can't even live my life. Um, So I ended up in the ED. I went to different primary care doctors, specialists, nutritionists, a therapist, a psychiatrist. I was really just kind of like trying everything under the sun to figure out what was wrong. I had scopes done and they found nothing. I was prescribed multiple rounds of antibiotics. I was put on different medications to try to like reduce the cramping, and that ended up making my pain worse. And then I was also trying like every elimination diet known to man. I tried the low FODMAP diet for over a year. Um, and anyone who's been on this diet knows just how incredibly restrictive it is. Like you can't eat certain like fruits and vegetables and no gluten. It's very, very restrictive. I did some food sensitivity blood tests, which I later learned are not accurate. I did some breath tests for SIBO, which I tested positive for, and then that sent me down a whole rabbit hole with that. I tried like massages, countless supplements, vitamins, antidepressants, probably a million other things that I'm just forgetting about now because it was just everything I could think of. Um, and as much as I didn't want it to be anything serious, every time I would kind of like go to the doctor, and they would run another test, or I would try a new diet and nothing would change. I started like slowly losing hope that anything would be able to cure me. Um, and so I just kind of kept going through these cycles of like getting my hopes up, like maybe it's this thing, and then it wasn't, and then just kind of getting disappointed.
You were at
So
this whole time like eating so little, housebound. You were not doing. You were working and you weren't doing much of anything at that point.
yeah, I mean, I was having to take time off work. I was like, I was afraid I was going to have to like give up my job because I didn't think I was going to be able to do it. And I'm a remote worker too. So it's like, that's like it was hard for me to think about that. And it was just kind of like fueling my fear about the whole situation. Yeah, and so yeah, pretty much at this point I was just throwing everything I could into fixing this, but I just couldn't believe how much pain I was in every day. And I was just sort of getting like these very little answers coming from doctors. So I started to get this feeling of like, I need to figure this out myself, And so I started to turn towards the internet, which everyone knows is a great place for finding health information. And I ended up on like these IBS forums with a bunch of like horror stories that just like fueled this whole spiral of like hopelessness and fear. And it just, I mean, I just really was at my rock bottom. By the end of 2021, I was like at my rock bottom. And um, by this point, I had developed pretty severe anxiety and OCD. And I was just really consumed with this fear that I either might die from some mysterious illness that the doctors weren't finding, or just be stuck in this state of like pain and suffering for the rest of my life. And they just would never figure out a way to help me. And I didn't want to sugarcoat any part of my journey here, because I just wanted to say for anyone out there, if they're feeling like this, that I want you to take away that there is hope. Like me sitting in front of you right now, I'm free from chronic pain. I eat whatever I want. I travel. I don't take any supplements. I don't go to the doctor other than for my regular checkups. So the transformation's been really, really amazing. So, um, what was the turnaround point for me? How did I get there? Um, well, oddly enough, the next year, I ended up catching COVID. And one of my symptoms when I was sick was I had this like really splitting headache. And then when I got better, it was like my symptoms had just like switched from my stomach into my head. And then all of a sudden, my chronic pain was now mainly in like my face and my jaw and my head. Um, and at this point, I got diagnosed with TMJ disorder, migraine, and fibromyalgia. And then I started going down this whole new treatment plan with all of those things. But this was
So you
really like my
had like a symptom imperative. It completely switched up to your head symptoms.
exactly. And it was like that was the point where it was like the first real indication to me that like something kind of like funky was going on. Because I was like, it just makes no sense that my symptoms would switch up like that. Um, And then also somewhere around this time, I ended up getting an ad on Facebook for the Curable app. And it was a wonderful ad. It was like a timeline that sort of just showed how different personality traits and life events could sort of like predispose you to develop chronic pain. And this whole like life timeline just really described me to a T. Um, so that's sort of what uh, caused me to start to look into some of this mind body stuff. I started reading Dr. Sarno. I read The Way Out. I started watching your videos on YouTube and just kind of like learning about how your brain can create pain. And it's not so cut and dry as we like to think in society about, injury equals pain. Um, and at first, I kind of felt like, as I was sort of like dipping my toe into this, I kind of felt like maybe it was a long shot, or like maybe this was just sort of like this woo-woo thing that, but I was just so incredibly desperate that I was like, I'll give this a try, right? Um, And so I started to kind of like slowly dedicate myself to this process, and it was a slow journey for me, but I sort of like started like slowly building my belief in the process and learning the tools to rewire my brain out of this like pain state. And I started to see like some improvements, and then I would have a setback and then some improvements again. But then like about a year into doing this work, I sort of had like a major jump forward in my progress. And I
So
sort
they
of,
just, yeah, pause for a second. So for the
yeah,
first like years, even this, the listeners know you're just put a whole year into the work, which is not unusual for some people to not get, you get a little bit of progress, right? But you put at that time you're doing some of those things. Did you do anything else during that first year? You did the curable. Did
yeah.
you doing any journaling, anything like that, or not
I
much?
didn't get very into journaling. I did it a little bit through Curable, but a lot of it was more just like watching a lot of videos. I read books. And actually, I do think maybe something that might have stalled my progress a little bit during that year was I was like consuming all of this information, and I was sort of like intellectualizing it, but I wasn't doing the work, that people like to say of like actually doing the somatic work. And I think that was one piece that maybe could have helped me do it a little bit faster, like the somatic tracking, like leaning into positive sensations, like really like working within the body. And I realized, because once I had my like what I would call like my jump forward in progress, what started that was really I started to truly believe that I could get better. And I
Yeah,
didn't
that's the
realize that,
huge little ding on the button again. A believe, right? You
yeah,
truly, authentically, right? Believe or even know. I guess like a knowing, right? So you had a shift in yourself, the way you
yes.
thought about it.
Yes, I didn't realize that I had that mental block there until it was gone. And then I was like, oh, I didn't
Right.
I had all these things, that all these like reasons why it wasn't going to work, or things that were kind of holding me back. Yeah, and I think I heard something that was sort of like one of my big light bulb moments with that was I was watching, actually it was the Huberman Lab podcast. He was interviewing Dr. Paul Conti, and he was talking about neuroplasticity. And I'd like intellectually understood this like this concept, but like the way he described it like really clicked for me. And he was talking about, like the sort of like the regular thought processes that we have, and like our normal habits are sort of like a 4-lane highway in your brain, and like the thoughts just go there so easily. It's like the path of least resistance, right? And then whenever you're trying to like adopt a new mindset or learn a new skill or something like that, it's like you're hacking through like a dense jungle with like a machete, and like you're just fighting every step of the way. And that's sort of how I started to think about this work, was like, but that like analogy really helped me understand that I could consciously impact my like brain, like the structure and function of my brain through like mindset, which was just such a like incredibly powerful idea. Like that was amazing to me. And it was empowering, because it was like, I can do that. Like I can make that change. And then also the idea that it wasn't going to be easy either. Like I was going to have to work at this, and it was going to be slow going to build those new neural pathways, and it was going to be uncomfortable. Um, just embracing those two things together was like it was such a turning point for me. And then
So
I
how long
really,
did it take you to get that shift forward? Like, so you recognize this, you're starting to cultivate this belief, right? Or positive, and how much time did you put in? Was it just an aha moment, or was it you're putting in some work and then there was a shift?
I would say about like 3 months. Like once I
Okay.
had that light bulb moment, and then I started kind of like approaching it differently, that it was like 3 months that I really started to notice like a big transformation. Yeah.
Great, great. And this was again just for the audience, you were shifting your how you perceived or thought about this. You're shifting your brain into this state that you were basically okay, or you're positive, or shifting some of these networks that were negative.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that part for me was a lot of the somatic work, like the somatic tracking, leaning into positive sensations, like um, sort of finding your sensory home base. There's all those sort of like exercises.
Yeah.
I found the most, yeah, I think that creating that feeling of safety, not just like telling myself in my head I'm safe. I mean, that helps too. But I think for me, the somatic work of creating a feeling of safety in the body through doing like those kind of like attentional exercises, I guess you could call them, were really, really helpful for me.
How long did you do? So, how much? So 3 months. How much time were you spending each day on those?
Um, I honestly wasn't even really doing a concerted effort thing. Like I wasn't sitting down for 30 minutes. It was more like whenever an opportunity would arise, like with a little bit of pain coming up, I would just sort of like um address it in that moment. But yeah, I would sit down and try to like every once in a while do like I don't know, a 10-minute video, but I didn't make it like um a big part of my day at that point. I was trying to
Okay.
focus a lot on just like living my life at the same
Yeah.
time.
So I think that's important for people to understand that it wasn't you dedicated all this time. It's like you infused it into your day, which I like, right? Whenever it comes up, you're able to bring that into your mind, into your mindset as you were moving back to your life, right? As a normal person. Okay, so that allowed you to shift forward that that piece of the puzzle there.
Yeah, it's ironic because it's like when you stop trying so hard is when you see
Yes.
better better results, but
Yes.
it's
Yes. It's hard for people to get there. You almost have to try hard first, right? And then
yeah.
you pull back a bit and you find that sweet spot.
Oh yeah. And I mean, I'm still working on little things where I realize I'm like going into that fix it mode kind of thing and trying to just like pause and just say, no, I can sit with this feeling for 30 seconds, you know, like it's an ongoing process to just adopt that mindset, but it gets so much easier over time. In the beginning, it sucks.
Yeah.
It really sucks, but it gets so much easier like the more you practice it.
And maybe share with the audience a bit about the accessing the positive feeling in your body so people can understand what you're talking about there on a sim.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a really important exercise for me. I think when you're in pain for a long time, you can kind of, your body starts to kind of become this really scary place, and you don't really want to pay attention to any sensations in your body. At least for me, like I just felt very detached from the physical feelings in my body. So, doing exercises of like paying it, like feeling the, the air going in and out of your lungs, or I would always go to like my foot, like I would go to my right foot because my right foot always felt like okay. So I would just kind of like really almost meditate on what the feelings were like in my right foot and just kind of pay attention to that. Even if the pain was happening over here, I could like keep 10% of my attention on the pain. I don't have to completely try to shut it out, but just kind of focusing on those neutral or positive feelings in another area of the body helped me feel like I could at least connect to the feelings in my body, and it didn't always have to be this like really scary experience, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And when you did that process for you in the beginning, was your mind getting encapsulated by the symptom a lot? Like in the beginning, was it like 90% was on the symptom? Right?
Hmm.
And you had to pull it away. Like the hypervigilance
Yeah.
was high in the beginning for you.
Oh yeah, it's such a gradual shift. Like, you read a lot about the book cures and the people who read one Sarno book and they're just like automatically cured. And I'm so happy for them. But I think the majority of people like probably are more like me, where it's a gradual process. And I think embracing that idea going into it, you don't put as much pressure on it, or as much pressure on yourself to like get better right away, even as much as you obviously want that. But it's that just kind of uh it makes it harder, I think, when you approach it with that attitude.
Absolutely. So you were doing that, what you were, focusing on positive or neutral feeling in the body. It sounds like you were infusing yourself with a belief that you could shift your system, right? So watching the Paul you were making, it gave you this agency. It sounds like that you could change your system, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. which I think is important that you were working
Yeah.
towards some change.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the empowerment piece is so important. I mean, you feel so beaten down, when you've been in chronic pain for a long time, it's so natural to feel defeated. But cultivating that feeling of empowerment and belief that you can get better is so critical, I think.
it is.
Um,
Yeah,
it's so critical and it's hard. I'm not just saying, oh yeah, just go out and be positive. It's hard. But you can shift your neural pathways. That's what this is so amazing about this work. You have power. Like you can do this. Like it's it took me so long to believe that, but it really is possible.
yeah. And I always tell that to people that your belief builds over time. It starts weak, maybe even fake it to make it type of thing. And it goes against how you feel. Your beliefs, your thoughts is in opposition to the feeling that you're defeated, let's say in the beginning. But after a while, right, like you said, it grows and grows, and there's a tipping point. It sounds like you hit
Hmm.
where you did have that shift, right, at that 3 month.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, it was like I said, it's very hard. It's been the hardest thing I've ever done in my life, but it's also been like the most like incredibly transformative thing for me. I'm so grateful for this work. I'm so grateful for the work that you do too, Jim. It's, I'm just glad that this exists for people out there too, who might be at that rock bottom point.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Everybody needs a lot of support at certain points of the journey. So let's continue. So after that, what happened after that? I know I worked with you for, I think, maybe 5 or 6 sessions over time. Um,
Mhm.
we worked on some of these things, and tell me how the rest of the journey was for you. You had that big shift forward, but you weren't all the way there or partway there.
Yeah, yeah, I think it was the empowerment kind of came first. And then it was I think oh, there was actually so it was the somatic work and then it was also kind of some work around like emotions and being kind of feeling your emotions, learning like what different emotions feel like in the body. Um, I think we can get very cut off from those as well and subconsciously sort of like push them away or try not to feel them. Um, learning how to identify them and just like feeling them, just letting them be was another part of my healing journey. Also not believing everything that I thought. Um, I dealt with a lot of like sort of like intrusive or automatic fear thoughts that I had to learn to just sort of like same way with the emotions, just identify and let it go. Not buy into it. That was another skill that I had to kind of work on.
Yeah,
Um, yeah. And I already kind of talked about like just embracing the suckiness of it, knowing that it's going to suck. I mean, with a lot of the somatic work, you kind of are having to confront your pain again and again and fight these instincts to either fight the pain or run away or
yeah.
like
The fight, flight,
sitting.
freeze.
Yeah, just kind of sitting with the feeling that is very painful or uncomfortable. It's hard to do, but like I said, it gets easier over time the more you do it because your brain starts to realize that this sensation is actually fine,
Yeah.
it
Sort of
learns
a
that,
pain reprocessing therapy type of approach, but with the somatic tracking of just observing, sitting with what you're feeling, right? Keeping the
yeah,
right mindset about it. Yeah. And just
yeah,
getting better and better with that over a period of time.
yeah, yeah. Like I watched your somatic tracking video. I probably watched it like 100 times. That was my go-to. So, yeah, it's definitely a skill. The emotions, the thoughts. I mean, those are really the biggest things
Yeah. You're
that I
covering,
did.
like I always like to highlight for the listeners that what some of these practices are, some of the things that help you, because it's similar things to other people, like you said, emotions, beliefs, the somatic level, working on these different aspects, all working together to help you move forward. And then what about, so like with the foods, talk a little bit about that because there was a point you're eating nothing. How did you do with that, with the exposure of going back to eating?
Yeah, and I wish I had more a way that was easier to replicate for others out there. But what happened with me was that I pretty much was like I had COVID that time when I had COVID. I pretty much just like said screw the diet. I don't feel well. I'm gonna eat whatever I want, and then it ended up being okay. So like it was ironic because I'd like tried to do these like reintroductions of different foods so many times, but it was such a stressful experience, like trying a food and oh, hopefully it doesn't trigger worse pain. And like it was such a just a emotionally challenging process that I was never really able to reintroduce foods that way. It was really just like a I went from highly restrictive to eating everything. And it was around that same time where like my symptoms just kind of shifted into my head that I was also able to eat normally again.
Yeah, that's such a big point there because I want people to take this in that look, you normalized it. You gave up the whole thing because even eating back slowly in a way was like saying something's wrong with my gut. It's like you basically said, I'm just gonna eat whatever, which is basically saying I'm fine. And that's why the symptoms abandoned that area of your body because it was in a way you had figured it out. You weren't scared anymore. It's so fascinating how the brain can do this. So it's like, well, that's not working. She's eating everything now. So let me go up to here for a while. Now that will, keep her occupied for a bit.
I know, I know. It's so counterintuitive with these elimination diets sometimes. And I mean, I'm sure for some people they're helpful because they have true like food allergies or things like that. But I do think the fear, it creates such fear around food that I don't think people realize how much stress that puts on you, and can compound the issue, when you don't even realize how much stress is already causing the issue. So yeah, it's a tricky thing with like digestive issues and abdominal pain. But uh, I would just encourage people to just entertain the idea that fear is contributing a lot more than maybe you think it is, or
Yeah.
stress or things in your
I mean,
life,
think about all this. You can only eat certain foods. You did all these diets, nothing worked. Well, we could argue that fear, which was just anxiety, was the main cause because how could it shift that quickly? How can you go back to eating all those foods that fast? Right? It has to be. It can't be anything wrong with you, which is incredible. You did all these other treatments and none of it helped because that wasn't the problem. So when you
I
face
know.
fear head on and it just happened, COVID was a silver lining for you, it sounds like.
Yeah,
It's like an
ironically,
opening.
right?
Ironically, it was a silver lining. It was like an opening to something for you. And yeah, then maybe getting that shift, right? That was such a dramatic shift. I think it sounds like for you, that was also a turning point to say, oh my God, how could this do this?
Yeah, and I actually did have another symptom imperative again, where then it switched into like my arms and legs, and I ended up having like very strange feel like pains in my arms and legs. Um, And I have had like, it hasn't been so like I've had symptoms switch back. Like I've had like some of the abdominal pain flare up again, but in a much more short-lived and less severe kind of way. So it's like I get those little triggers again of like old symptoms, but yeah, it's just so interesting how it switches around like that. And that really helped me build a belief too, because it was like this obviously doesn't make any sense from like a structural standpoint or any sort of like bodily issue.
Yeah. I always tell people it's like it shows its cards. It's like a game of poker and it shows its hand. You go, oh, I know what you
Yeah.
are. Oh, there's no way this could do this. And yeah, just also like you said, you highlighted that it could go back and come back and forth for some people between couple symptoms or an old pathway can get reactivated at any time over because of the programming or stress. So these things could kick up again. But once you get a whole handle on it like you did, like you said, they're usually short-lived. They're not nearly as bad.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, it's so much easier to deal with now too when it does happen, just because I have so many more tools to deal with it.
So you're back living a full life now. Sounds amazing from where you come from. And
Yeah.
what else? Anything else you want to share with the audience for people who are going through this process or struggling? I know you shared the idea to keep going. That there's hope. Is there anything else you want to share?
Just reiterating, like you can do it. Just keep gradually like trying to decrease that fear. I mean, it's like I said, it was a gradual process for me. Yeah, and I always thought that if I could get out of chronic pain, that I would like want to, share my story. So thank you, like Jim, for having me on here. And I'm sharing more of my story too on my Instagram. It's which is at Rethink Pain. So if you want to follow along, I'll be sharing more of like kind of tips and more about my story there too.
Yeah, and I'll put it on the notes on the YouTube as well, so you can send it to me after we're finished. We'll put it on there. Yeah, getting the word out is so important, I think, and having this. I mean, do you feel like a different person now, or like you said, it was such a dramatic, recovery for you?
Yes, I
Right.
mean it's amazing. I'm back to my life. Like that's truly how it feels. Yeah, I never thought I would be saying this. Like I never thought. I had all the reasons in the world why I thought this wasn't going to work. Um and it actually did work. And I'm so incredibly grateful. I'm like, yeah, I don't even know what to say.
Yeah, no, it's well, your face says it all, and it is a moving experience when you can get to the other side. I mean, everybody says how grateful they were for it because it's a life-changing experience to suffer as bad as you did, to be housebound, not eating anything, and think your life is over, to come all the way back again, and it's pretty incredible when you think about it, and to go through all the other treatments that didn't work, and to come back to this approach, which is basically the last one that people find usually.
Yeah,
Incredible.
I know. And I wish there was a better pipeline for people to find this. I wish that doctors were more aware of this area of work, so that they could, help when someone gets diagnosed with one of these typical like kind of TMS things, like help them find this work. Because that could have saved me a lot of time, if one of my doctors could have said that to me. And I'm so grateful for doctors and everything they do. I think that this is just like a societal thing. This is just something that like we need to get the word out more and like people need to be more aware of.
Absolutely. Yeah. And like you said in the beginning of your story, I think the history is so important. And I think that's what doctors and well-meaning healthcare professionals miss. And I certainly did in the beginning of my career, was taking a full history and inventory of what's going on. Like you mentioned some things about your life history and so forth that were contributing factors, and some other stuff that really kicked it up. And so we just don't ask about that. We don't ask psychosocial history. We don't ask about childhood. We don't ask about emotions, stressors, that these people believe these things aren't important, or they're just secondary little things that might influence it 10% or something, but not that they can be the main drivers to somebody's problem.
Hmm. Yeah, and think about what you're consuming on social media too, because there's like a lot of like, fear-inducing things out there, and you can kind of get stuck in like an algorithm of like, negative things that are gonna subconsciously kind of impact your mindset too. So yeah, just think about what's in your life and the kind of things that are like maybe contributing to some of that fear and pressure too.
Yeah, yes, certainly. Yeah, because you had the ongoing or contributing stressors, but then you had all the subsequent fear stressors from just the treatments, right? And the groups and the messages and information you read. And I think that also gets people, like you said, stuck, well meaning, but gets people
Mhm.
stuck into going further into their issue.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here. I really am honored to have you here to share your story. And so many people will resonate with this. And I think every success story is just super helpful for people to hear that there is a way out. There is a way to get better doing this, and the timeline varies for people. And I think that's so important. I always like to hear, okay, you did a year of this where it wasn't, it took that much time to get things going, and then months after. So the whole process was, again, how long would you say for you?
I mean,
Mind body
I
process.
oh, starting when I started the work, it like a year and a half, maybe.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
Just
total.
good for people to hear that, because some people give up too soon. And I think that's, where people will give up on the process, but it can take that long to shift the nervous system and brain. It's important to
Hmm.
understand for some people, and longer too for others.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm still practicing things, like as much as I have my life back, I still have to kind of like make sure that my brain doesn't go down those paths again. So it's kind of like it's a process.
Yeah, it's a lifelong process. It continues on, and we'll always have to be watching, because stuff can come back, because
Hmm.
stress can happen at any time, and we can fall into our old patterns potentially. So
Yeah.
again, thank you so much for being here.